Morning. Welcome to day 2 of the 5th annual 360 Open Source Summit. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Graham Brookie. I am the director of the Digital Forensic Research Lab here at the Atlantic Council.
And I'm Rose Jackson, the director of the Democracy and Tech Initiative, also at the Atlantic Council. I don't know why I feel the need to say that each morning.
Very much all of the Atlantic Council. Yesterday we heard an enormous amount of conversation ranging from leaders and partners working to counter and address Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine, as well as activists on the front lines of the democratic backslide in Hong Kong, activists, journalists, dissidents targeted by NSO Pegasus, and so many other sessions. Which ones am I missing?
Well, we ended the day looking forward and taking all of the conversations and lessons about the world as it is and tried to bring it into what is it that the world might look like and how do we prepare ourselves to have a more democratic and rights-respecting version of a digital world with new technologies coming online. We also had our digital Sherlocks doing a range of trainings, including from our partners at the Open Technology Fund, National Democratic Institute, and others, which brings us to today. I think our digital Sherlocks are started right now.
The digital Sherlocks already got started all on the 3rd floor. Right now they are doing a training or a capacity building session with our partners at Code for Africa that we're very excited about. They'll be joining us throughout the day. I think that their lanyards are a different color. So we'll see you in a little bit, digital Sherlocks.
Absolutely. So to give you a little sense of what to expect today, I'm jokingly calling it Government Day. But you're going to hear from a lot of folks, ranging from just now, I'm not going to give away Graham's introduction. Of course, we have our major keynote later today with Secretary of State Antony Blinken, interviewed by Nobel Peace Prize winning Maria Ressa, which we're very excited for. But we've also got a number of other government partners working on everything from addressing influence operations to talking about what it means when women are unable to participate in political life because the online environment has gotten too toxic. Really cheerful, light, happy things, of course. But we're really excited about what's coming today. There's the DSA and DMA drafters coming in to update us on where things stand and what to expect moving forward. And a number of things I'm sure that I'm forgetting, but you have in your app, which is a great segue to some of what we want to make sure to cover. Your agenda, which I know we had some issues with that yesterday, so if it's not showing up for you properly, do the force quit, reopen it, and you should be good. Of course, reach out to us and let us know if that's not working. A few other little housekeeping tidbits before I pass over. We do have the whiteboard again today. There are 2 new prompts on it, or shortly will be. One is asking you to think a little bit about what the next, let's say, 7 years from now looks like, what problems you think we're going to be trying to address, with a little bit of a, let's just say, a spicy prompt to the right of that the Digital Forensic Research Lab loves to debate on a regular basis. Graham, would you like to lead that one?
Yeah, I would love to. It's a common thing to happen on DFR Lab Zoom meetings. We have staff that's spread out across 5 continents. We don't get to see each other every single day in person at the office, especially throughout the pandemic. And we also have had a lot of new staff join us over the last 5 years. We went from 3 people, now we're 40 people. And when I like to talk about misinformation and disinformation and how it works with a bunch of experts that are tracking this and building standards for researching this online, the best way to do it is just to throw an innocuous question, sneak attack into staff meetings. And so one of the things that we get the hardest reaction from our staff on, or our team on, is a muffin a pastry? So it's on the whiteboard. We're very much welcoming your views on this. Is a muffin a pastry? I just raised this question because a lot of people are asking. I think that there's probably a lot of viewpoints on this. And so I'm very much looking forward to seeing what we come up with.
Yeah, if you'd like to include an explanation on your sticky note as to why you firmly believe a muffin is or is not a pastry, we encourage that as well. This is why you come to 360 OS for the incisive questions of our day.
There's a technical definition, there's some vibes, there's a lot of things to kind of work through on whether a muffin's a pastry, so.
I mean, it really, yeah, we could get into some questions about whether we want to get strictly definitional or we want to look at kind of the ecosystem that we're operating in. We're going to not debate this right now. With that, though, I want to pass it back to Graham to get us set up for the next round of things. A reminder to everyone while you're in this room, if you're taking coffee breaks and the live session is happening, to keep your voices down. The lunch later today, as a reminder, is on this floor for folks in the main session. On the 4th floor, down to the left. If you ever have a question or you are a little lost, find someone with a black lanyard and they will get you taken care of. With that, let's get it started.
Thank you so much. As always, thank you to the DFR Lab staff as well. This conference would not be possible without the entirety of the team chipping in. It's not typical that you come to a conference and get registered again by one of the foremost experts on looking at the online information environment, and so those black lanyards are a very, very good resource. For our first conversation for today, we're very pleased to welcome, although be it virtually, a really, really interesting conversation from a place on the planet that is an interesting crossroads, that is on the front lines of countering authoritarianism, on the front lines of a bunch of the kind of big tech policy questions that we have, ranging from industrial tech policy questions to kind of hardware, software issues, as well as a robust democracy that has extraordinary digital service for its citizens. So we're going to have a conversation with Digital Minister of Taiwan, Audrey Tang, hosted by Laís Martins, who is the Persephone Meal Fellow of Niccolo Journalism at the Pulitzer Prize Center. So please welcome the video.
Hello, and thank you for having us for this important conversation as part of the 360 Open Summit and RightsCon. If we could just get started. Hello, Minister Tang. Thank you for being here. I'd like to get started with a question about Democracy 2030. So we have to account for what happened in the past 2 years of the pandemic. What concerns me particularly is how governments, including ones that are considered democratic, have used this crisis as an opportunity to develop technologies with no regard for criteria and principles such as fairness and proportionality, consequently ramping up surveillance during a very vulnerable moment in history where citizens have deposited in them trust to guide us through these unprecedented times. I'd like to hear your thoughts on how this scenario impacts our prognostics for 2030, considering that we'll likely be facing more crises in the coming years, not only health-wise, but also environmentally. And more importantly, considering that Taiwan managed to build its digital-centered response while respecting principles and increasing and maintaining trust.
Thank you for this very important question. In Taiwan, we countered the pandemic over the past 2 years and a half now with no single day of lockdown, just as we countered the disinformation crisis without a single administrative takedown of websites. So the idea here is to trust the citizens, because to give no trust is to get no trust. The civil society generally weakens when a top-down measure of top-down, lockdown, shutdown, takedown is imposed on citizens, and the ability for a community to self-organize, to be resilient against incoming challenges, weaken when the state, although they do not have perfect information, try to make uniform decisions. So I think the main lessons from the Taiwan model is that if you trust the citizens with all the data that's published upon collection, as long as it's not privacy or trade secret related, then the citizens closest to the pain actually make better innovations and better adaptations based on the same transparent available data compared to any top-down state.
I'd like to move a bit into that area. Over the past few years, we have extensively documented as the press with whistleblowers how platforms, mainly in the global south, are being used to undermine democracy. So by radical actors, radical political actors, extremist groups. But at the same time, we have seen big examples also coming from these regions of how these platforms enable citizens to organize and ultimately defend democracy in their home countries. And I would expect these online spaces to be even more necessary in the coming years for this purpose of organization and defending democracy. But in some countries, in some regions at least, and much led by the West, we are seeing efforts to regulate platforms. So in the coming years, we will see platform regulation coming. In my country, however, the attempt that we are seeing to regulate platforms has a collateral effect of ultimately curbing citizens' freedom online. So there is a confusion between what platforms do and what citizens do. And in an effort to regulate platforms, we are regulating citizens. So based on your experience, I'd like to ask you, how do we move on from here? Is there a way forward that does not implicate in having governments dictate how platforms will operate? Is there a multi-governance model that you view as possible?
Thank you. That's a really, really important question. Now, around 20th century, I remember people like Bill Gates saying that because it doesn't cost anything to send email, the spam problem will consume all the email bandwidth, and we'll have to start regulating and charging postal stamps for outgoing emails. Otherwise, we'll all be swamped with junk mail and so on, paraphrasing, not his words. Now, I think that the point I'm making is that Taiwan do not, even to this day, have a law or regulation against unsolicited email. On the other hand, we pretty much consider the spam problem solved. So what happened during turn of century to now? Well, people organized internationally into the spam house and many other technological communities. And then through voluntary participation, anyone can flag any incoming email as spam, in which case the fingerprint, the likelihood of an email that looks like that to reach other people's inbox decreases because of this voluntary contribution of flagging incoming email as spam. But because it's voluntary, you're not forced to share this signal to any organization, nor would you be punished if you do not share this particular incoming email as spam. Maybe you treat it as a piece of art or things like that, right? So the point I'm making is that the internet governance and the internet community already have perfectly good ways to tackle this kind of dangers. On the internet, it's called multi-stakeholderism. The stakeholders joining together, designing better mechanisms for people to participate. Now, one of the reasons why many jurisdictions want to regulate the tech platforms, I liken it to imposing a lockdown on their citizens' freedom movement, is because they consider this information to be so rampant at a stage of community widespread transmission. And so lockdown looks like the early way to tackle it. And my counter to that is always that we need to vaccinate everyone. So if we vaccinate sufficient amount of people, as we do in Taiwan, we do not have to impose lockdowns and we resume international travel as of this month. But if we do not have the antibodies to the disinformation in people's minds, then of course one single viral disinformation can cripple democracy, especially if it occurs on the week before the presidential election, right? So what I'm trying to get at is that we need to get those viral vaccines, like humor over rumor, notice and public notice. These are the Taiwanese playbooks to counter disinformation to everyone and equip people in basic education and lifelong education with the equivalent of public health expertise, which I believe would be journalism, civic journalism expertise. Because if you've done the contact tracing, well, attribution and the sources, right? And you've done the entire analysis, you're aware of the framing fact and things like that, it's far less likely for you to buy into the latest doctored photo and just blindly share it to 10 other people. The R value, the basic transmission rate, decreases sharply if you have received even just the most basic civic journalism.
So one of the key takeaways we have from this Global Voices and Freedom Monitor project, for which I participated as the researcher in Brazil, is how digital authoritarianism or techno-authoritarianism has a borderless or transborder nature. So it's not really that it's attached to one state or one group operating in one country, but it's global. In Brazil, for example, we are seeing a democratically elected government use technology to advance its authoritarian agenda. So both on social media with the use of citizen data, controlling citizen data. But in other countries we monitored in this project, this escalate may be coming from corporations or foreign actors. So I'd like to ask you what signs of digital authoritarianism you notice in Taiwan, and how can a civic response or a civic tech response be built to counter these movements?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have in my mind last May when we introduced the venue-based 1922 SMS contact tracing system. It was a design from the GovZero Civic group where people scan a venue's QR code with their built-in phone, no app required, and people who do not have smartphones can manually text the 15 random digits to 1922, a toll-free number. It's like a post-it note that stores in your local telecom, not to the state. And the contact tracers only piece together this random code from the telecom, the mapping between the random code and the venues, and so on, to reconstruct the exposure notification information that is required. And we do reciprocal transparency. That is to say, you can go to a website to view in the past 28 days how many municipal or central contact tracers have looked at your information, at which day, for what purpose. So it's like a mutual accountability. It's like a shared ledger. Now, all this was baked in, was designed on the very first day from a lot of very privacy-conscious civic tech people. And we make public attribution saying that this is invented by the civil society. And you do not actually have to trust your telecom. If you trust, say, your municipal government, instead use their QR code scanner. If you don't trust either, you can still do pen and paper or stamping your way in, or later on use Bluetooth-based contact tracing. So it's a plural landscape, a plural ecosystem for contact tracing. Now, the point I'm making now is this first made it harder for other parts of the state to then go to a more authoritarian use of these data. I remember a judge going public on the media in a blog post saying that the judge have received a search warrant to the mapping table between the venue code and the venues, because through the legal wiretapping as part of crime investigation, the investigator would really like this information because they can investigate the crime, I guess, more effectively. On the other hand, the civic tech design actually said on each and every SMS that this is for pandemic control only. So it must not be used for crime investigation purposes. So it's a blatant norm violation. So obviously the judge denied such warrant, so the police never received that mapping table. But then most importantly, because everyone understood the norm was not that, it enabled the judge to go public and say, you know, the Ministry of Justice better stop doing this and better start issuing an interpretation that this is not communication as per the wiretapping Act. This is a pandemic control measure that's deleted in 4 weeks rather than other kind of SMS, which is deleted in half a year and so on. They're fundamentally different things. Now, if we look at our nearby jurisdictions where it's the government introducing this technology, they often interpret and say, yeah, maybe let's use it for serious crimes, or yeah, maybe let's use it for this list of crimes that's dictated, I don't know, by the legislators or something, which is a fine response by democratic standards of everything has to have a law backing it up. But because the original invention was not from the civil society, the citizens who detect this drift of purpose really do not have an immediate counter response because it was not plural. It was mandatory, or it was the only way to do contact tracing in their jurisdiction. But in Taiwan, because if we only had that, then of course it limits our ability to respond. No, we have other choices. So the citizens can actually do a social sanction and collectively go to other contact tracing methods unless the Ministry of Justice reply very quickly to say, no, we promise we will never do this, and here are the technological proofs, which they immediately did. So we do have an interpretation in place that says these are not to be considered part of wiretapping, should not actually get even the random codes to the police in the first place. So that's I think a outside game, a vibrant outside game that is capable of not just demonstrating against something, but demonstrating with something, right? A demo, like showing viable prototypes. That is the key to the equal footing between the movements on one side of human rights and the government on the other side, so they can enjoy a co-creative partnership.
Great. I think that's a great takeaway to end our conversation. Very inspiring. So many ideas that I hope people who are watching us can put into place in their own countries, in their own cities and municipalities. Thank you so much, Minister Tang. This was a pleasure to be here in this conversation with you.
Thank you. Live long and prosper.